Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dan DiNardo. I'm standing for election out of District 31 for the House of Representatives for the state of Alaska. And that is the common law people of Alaska, not the international corporation that you know as the state of Alaska. Because all of the states in the so-called union are nothing but independent principalities based upon the Swiss cantonal system. That since 1937 there has not been a United States anymore. And the great man, Joe Vogler, who started the Alaska Independence Party, was very eloquent in that all this is a commercial, corporate enterprise in conjunction with the other 49 international corporate states. There is no unified country anymore, and that's why you are seeing all the problems, all of the decay, all the illegal immigration that is doing nothing but bringing in the fifth column of the paramilitary that are going to open up an attack on this country within the next 4 years. They're going to take the country down in an attempt. It won't be successful the first time because martial law will be declared, and we're going to have foreign armies introduced into Alaska and the America, the so-called United States, the corporate United States, I ought to refer to it, to put down the insurrection of the civilian population. Those agreements have already been signed, and I have a Freedom of Information appeal before the Pentagon right now for a copy of the Northcom arrangement with the Canadian military and the Canadian government, that they have a right now to come into Alaska during the construction of the gas line per Sarah Palin's deal with the Canadians, the act of treason upon the part of Sarah Palin, but they have a deal with Northcom, the so-called U.S. military, to come in and manage and oversee the construction of that project because it affects their national security interest. And the Pentagon does not want me to have a copy of it. Sarah Palin doesn't want that copy of that agreement publicized. Neither does our so-called U.S. congressional representatives, that prostitute Lisa Murkowski, that prostitute Ted Stevens, and that prostitute Don Young. And that's exactly what they are. They've never served the interest of Alaskans. They've only served their own financial interest and the financial interest of the Communist-controlled Bar Association and the Communist-controlled Banking Association. Now, specifically, I'd like to refer to this subprime crisis. There is no crisis. There is plenty of synthetic financing through derivatives to prohibit any crisis. They create all this stuff out of thin air. There's nothing that prohibits them from scratching more numbers on the books of accountancy of the financial institutions. But why they're creating this crisis is because the Bank of International Settlements 4 years ago told all the banks that you are going to shrink your capital base. And you're going to create this crisis because it's the next political global terrorism move upon our part to take over all titles in property. We do this every 50 years. This is the time to do it. We're doing it worldwide. And the instrumentality, of course, is the so-called international corporate United States, because it is the largest creator of this synthetic debt structure, perpetual annuity debt. Just like our founding fathers, when they came over here during the 17th century, the Pilgrims, they came as bonded, indentured servants. That same servitude has been placed back upon all the people of the United States. And I will tell you that I need to show you this again because it's critical. This is the United States that destroyed all of that. But in 1963, when they murdered President Kennedy and later they murdered Robert Kennedy, they reinstituted the most diabolical of all legal practices, and that was the international law merchant. The international law merchant, again, as I showed you before, is represented by the pyramid on the Federal Reserve note. This note is not of American issue, but is issued by the Bank of International Settlements. The Bank of International Settlements controls every economy, every political party, every movement, and every act of legislative authority in the world in every country that belongs to that organization, which is virtually every country. And the reason that they have taken over is that they have an agenda separate and above all humankind. They are out to destroy humankind. They are the ones that are polluting our planet. They're the ones that are destroying the Arctic ice, the Antarctic ice pack. They are the ones, and people like Al Gore and his multi-billionaire family have been at this for decades. They are major coal and oil producers themselves. And of course, Nikolai Lenin stated way back at the beginning of the 20th century that we're going to create an environmental movement through non-governmental organizations, NGOs. And I know you've seen these mentioned very prominently in the international and the national press, because NGOs are financed and sponsored totally and completely by the Communist International, which was put into a corporate trust in 1923 by Nikolai Lenin himself. That's why all corporations are communistic. That's why the communist movement, its structure is corporate in nature. What NGOs do is they provide the pressure from below, and then the governments of the world provide the pressure from above, and the human beings and the human race are in the middle. And through terroristic acts like 9/11, which was conducted by the Zionist Mossad, the CIA, the U.S. Marshal Service, the Secret Service, the FBI, MI5 and MI6 in England, the German organization, which most of you and most of the world has never heard of, it's called the Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst. It is the central intelligence agency for all intelligence agencies, and it's based in basically Buchenwald and also Auschwitz. Isn't that interesting that it would be based in there? And you know who the present leader of it is? George Bush Sr. That's right, the former head of the U.S. CIA is now head of this international umbrella organization that controls all activities of all secret services. And I don't want to forget that the Soviet Union KGB, the Soviet Union GRU, which is Soviet military intelligence, and the Czechoslovakian military intelligence, which is the most trusted partner of the Soviet military intelligence agency, the GRU, and also the Chinese intelligence agency. They coordinated their activities. They planted the bombs in those buildings that went off. And Columbia University picked up on his seismological equipment that these were computer sequence bombs going off. The firemen entering the building, they testified to that on live tape that's now been released. I don't know why you people don't want to take a look at the historical, the engineering facts. I mean, these are spoken of by very prominent organizations and prominent people. That was not done by a bunch of Arabs who were not trained to fly those planes properly. They didn't know. They didn't have a clue. That was all radio monitored and controlled flight patterns. That's why your U.S. military never got off the ground. That's why you have the Cheney and the Bush, the rise of the Fourth Reich in America. That's exactly what's happening. And what they're doing right now through the so-called subprime crisis is they're taking control of all the landed interest in this country. That's exactly what they're doing. Instead of allowing the common law operation where the people receive back their alloidial rights and land, they're beating them to the punch and taking it all away from them before they can assert that interest. It's happened before. It happens throughout history repeatedly, every 50 years. Take a look in 1949. What happened in 1989? The Berlin Wall came down. The so-called Soviet Union disappeared. But you know what else happened? In 1989 was the Soviet-U.S. treaty that changed the structure of the maritime boundary in the Arctic Ocean between the Soviet Union and Alaska that ended up transferring part of the Aleutian chain back to the Soviet Union with promises of further negotiations and further transfers. But yet Mr. Murkowski and Mr. Stevens and Mr. Young have never told you about that. Yet it's an open historical fact, and not only that, but the legislature passed 2 resolutions due to my efforts and a few other people to assert the state's interest in this criminal corruption. I'm going to continue this discussion on a further YouTube presentation.